I'm Suzanne, and today we're going to paint a barred owl. Now, I love painting birds. That's no lie. But I especially like painting owls, and I haven't done that many recently. And I actually just wanted to start a series of owls. So you're going to see a couple more owls before it's all said and done. But this painting is on a traditional canvas. It happens to be a 16 by 40, I think, a 16 by 40. So you can tell it's a pretty long piece. And yeah, I have a lot of fun with it. This is also a very muted palette, and I'll go over the paints that we're going to use for this painting here in just a bit. But this is a really fun piece, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you decide to paint along. So yeah, and if you're not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe and ring the bell so you'll know when the next owl painting is going to come up. I promise I paint more than just owls, but you're going to see a lot of owls here coming up because I want to do a series. So, okay, let's go ahead and jump into the barred owl painting.
I start out by mixing a very neutral gray paint in acrylic. I like to ground sometimes, especially large pieces, with acrylic paint. It saves me a little bit of money because it's a little bit cheaper to use acrylic paint. And it just, I don't know, it offers a great surface to paint on. Have you ever grounded your canvases in acrylic paint first? I'd love to hear about your experience and leave it in the comments section. I want to talk to you about it because it's interesting. A lot of folks do and don't do that. There you go.
Okay, so here's the colors that we've got squozed out for our barred owl. I have a little burnt sienna. This is Michael Harding. I have raw umber. That's Winsor Newton. Burnt umber, Winsor Newton. Van Dyke brown, Winsor Newton. Ivory black, Winsor Newton. Payne's gray, Winsor Newton. Titanium white, Winsor Newton. So what I'm going to do is just kind of block in my owl. I'm trying to keep my colors very muted and soft. One color that I haven't put out yet is the bright yellow beak, but we'll add that a little bit later. But let's go ahead and see what we can get done with just these colors.
Once my background, my grounding in the acrylic is dry, I go ahead and just kind of rough in my barred owl. Now, here I'm just using a medium-sized rosemary ivory filbert here. And I'm just really doing a very basic overhaul. I'm not even sure about the shape. And you saw that I kind of had this sketched on with a little bit of graphite, but you'll see I end up moving the tail position. There's a lot of morphing that's going to go on. Now, everybody knows I like my soft edges. And even though I'm kind of blocking this in on an already dry acrylic surface, of course, I'm using oils at this point, folks. I'm not using acrylic anymore, other than just the basic grounding. But I'm getting my dark values in around the face, and we'll eventually just put a little bit of another gray background with oil paint so I can work the soft edges. That's usually pretty critical for me. I like a soft edge. I think most artists do. So you'll see that I'm just kind of putting this paint to the edge here with a little bit, just kind of morphing this bird in, getting the shapes in. And, here I'm talking about putting down this other paint, and I've not done it yet. But you get the idea. I'm still just kind of moving through, getting my shape of my owl in. And I'm really letting the owl itself dictate the palette. And I'm not just talking about the color of the owl, but I'm talking about the entire painting. I wanted the bird to stand out a little bit more than the background. But, I got to keep that background pretty neutral. And so hence that gray background. If you'll remember one of my pieces where I did a great blue heron, I also used this same technique, basically painting on an acrylic base. It works out well for me. here we go. Here's my, little light paint in the background because I do want to keep the edges soft on this bird. And so I'm just kind of popping that in, and I think I'm using a Monday mop here, and just kind of wanting a little bit of soft paint in the background. And that gives me an opportunity to work those edges. So you can see I can now get in there and get the edges of the bird, and also gives me an idea of my values. Since the bird itself is basically a gray bird with a little burnt sienna in the wings, it's got some striping in its chest, and that'll come a little bit later. I want to be able to make the bird stand out from the background. So I'm lightening it up in some places, and you can see it's a little bit different than the original background gray. But interesting enough, I'm using a very thin layer. It's such a thin layer, in fact, that it just gives me enough paint to blend my edges, to give me that soft look. So I can kind of play with it. So I'm putting that, a little bit whiter, wanting the bird to stand out against the background. Of course, I do use photo references, and I have several that I'm working from. But I will change up my values, change up a lot of it to suit my artistic needs. Remember, folks, photographic references are simply that. They're references. The artistic aspect needs to come from you, the painter. So, yeah, I'm always curious. How do you paint? Do you actually use references? Do you have several references? Do you just copy the reference in front of you? I try to get my students that here in the studio to be mindful that they can make changes based on their artistic preference. And not just take a photo reference, and copy it. Because you know what? That's half the fun, is just making it happen, right? Is just making it happen on the canvas. So I'm still very much in the blocking in stage. Interesting, this bird, the barred owl, has very black eyes, which, we're used to seeing the big giant owl eyes, like a horned owl that has, big gold yellow eyes with the intense pupil. These birds have very dark eyes, so it's kind of have a spooky edge. Okay, so I'm kind of suggesting where tree branches are going, and I'm, just keeping everything soft. I want the background kind of soft so I can build my branches up, and you'll see as I move through the piece, the branches will become more prominent that are closer to you. I'm starting in on some of the stripes on the bird, and I'm using a combination of Van Dyke Brown and raw umber, and just popping those stripes in there. They've got the barred owl, as the name implies, they have bars that kind of come down like that, and they also have bars on their wings. And these names sometimes wildlife names aren't that creative. They look at the bird and say, yeah, it's got bars on it, let's call it a barred owl. But sometimes they're named after the person who discovers the bird, right? But anyhow, here we go, just putting in some more feathers, looking for contrast, because we're basically dealing with a lot of grays. So you can see that the first color that I put down on the bird's breast was a very cool bluey gray, and then I'm bringing in some warmer whites on top of it, etc. So you'll see that I kind of struggled with this tail. I think I moved it several times, and keep lengthening the tail just a bit. Interesting thing about a lot of owl species, the wingtip is usually longer than the actual tail. When we see most birds, the tail feathers are longer and the wingtips are shorter. But in a lot of owl species, the wingtips are longer than the tail. So there you go. There's your little owl fact for the day. But you can see that I'm actually having to work that background color into the bird itself. And not really sure what's going on here. That looked very digital for a second. But anyway, I've switched to a smaller pointed round, and I'm able just to get that edge a little bit. I'm working some of the detail that you see that's in the top of the bird's head. But because I want the bird to look like part of its surroundings, I'm watching in my values. I want my values to be a little lighter in the back and cooler and softy, kind of a softer blend as I move forward. So the front of the bird is really what's going to be in the most detail, really working those soft edges and putting in some more of the bars and the ruffle of the feather. This is the fun part, folks. This is what I love, the detail, right? So I'm just kind of popping that in there using a small pointed round brush. Happens to be a red dot, which is a synthetic sable by Rosemary. I'm really starting to pile on the detail at this point. And you can see underneath, the throat area of the bird, I've really fluffed up and layered those feathers in. And a lot of that is just done with, controlling the amount of value and keeping your lightest value and the most detail on the edge of the feather. So you get the feeling of depth in that area of the neck. And working those wings. They do have wing feathers, obviously individual feathers, there's stripes, all that kind of stuff has to factor in here. So I'm still trying to figure it out. And I'm kind of putting that in there. But I know I can go back with my one of my other brushes to do the detail. You'll see. I'll get there. Because, I love my sword brushes, right? And that's perfect for doing wing feathers, tail feathers, all of it. But meanwhile, we are just kind of still popping in some more of the detail, and I'm moving through it. So basically, I'm wanting to finish the bird. I want to get the bird completed into the background, and then move the trees and etc., all the branches in around the bird once I have it completed. And here we go, back to the tail. I told you I was really struggling with some of the positioning of the tail. So I'm moving it over a little bit more towards the left. And because I really want to stay true to this actual species of bird. And so I'm moving the tail over and lengthening the tail just a bit. So you can see even at this stage of the game, you still have a lot of work time with your painting to make corrections like this. Underneath the bird, it's going to be a little cooler. So there's that bluey gray that I have right close to the bird's body, bringing the tail stripes or bands back in and putting everything back in place here. This is that's just kind of how I work. I never have an exact drawing, or very rarely do I. I just kind of have a suggestion. My sketches are merely suggestions. The actual structure and it happens during the painting process for me. Some artists work differently. I admire those who have executed sketches that are just perfect, and they just work off the sketch. That's not how I work. So kind of moving through, getting those soft edges, covering up problems that I may have had, and still wanting the soft edge. The interesting thing too about birds, especially birds of prey, owls being in that family, since they fly at night a lot and their prey may be on the ground, and where senses are very acute, like hearing, the feather tips have a muffler on it, a very soft, fluffy edge, so they can fly silently through the night, and the prey rarely will hear them coming. They don't even know it hit them. So here we go. I talked about the sword brush, and here's where I get to do some of the fun detail. If you don't have a sword brush, you'll want to add that to your box of tricks, because it allows you to get that nice, precise line like that, but also you don't have to load it quite as often. It gives you that long, continuous line. I like them better than riggers, quite frankly. So you can see I'm actually adding in, you're seeing the secondary feathers, the primary feathers, and putting in the definition between the feathers. And you gotta love it. The sword brush, folks. Swords and daggers are great for this. I like using daggers for short hairs, and I like using swords for long lines, like the definition between feathers, horses' manes, depending on the size of the painting, right? So, but yeah, this, and like I said in the beginning, I think this painting is a 16 by 40, which is kind of an odd shape, but it is a long painting. So yeah, that's why, the size of your brush, oops, sorry about the hair in the way. The size of your brush is often dictated by the size of the painting you're working on. So the bigger the painting you're working on, the larger the brushes you should be working with. But getting those details in, and my own hair into the shot, but sorry about that. But yes, we're getting the details into the wing feathers. Well, I've got to get in the lighter spots on the back. Of course, this is a barred owl, and there's a species of owl called the spotted owl that they look very similar, except the barred owl is a little bit lighter in color, a little bit larger, and has more of the barred or lines on its chest, and the spotted owl is grayer, a little bit more pigment, darker bird. And has more spots on its front. But interesting enough, these birds actually interbreed sometimes, and so you'll have something called a sparred owl, spotted barred owl, and they have the kind of the characteristics of both species. But anyhow, I digress. But here I'm just kind of putting in some of the detail. We're getting in the little spots on his back and just moving it through. I'm using a small ivory it looks like a flat, but I believe it's actually a filbert. And then I switched over to a smaller pointed round that is actually a red dot brush here, and it's good for just getting in those little details like the edges of the wings and such. Just kind of suggested where the stick that this bird is perched on is going, so now I can kind of establish where the rest of the tail goes. So you see I've elongated this tail quite a bit from what I originally started at, and that just goes to show that I will morph all over the place, and my sketches that I do on my canvas are just that, just merely sketches to give me an idea where I'm going. Now I've got to kind of get those barred patterns in. So I'm using a little flat, and you rarely see me using flats, but this is an ivory flat, and I'm just kind of getting these little streaks of color that are bars. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the spotted owl has more of a spotted pattern on the breast, whereas the barred owl has more of these just strong lines or bars. And I switched over to the pointed round, this little tiny brush by Rosemary from the Workbench Warrior series. I really do like their brushes. So it's letting me get in there and get into the tight places. But got to get all these little details in. And this is where I start having fun, because I'm getting close to finishing up. And, I really wanted my bird to be finished before I really tackled the background, which is kind of opposite of what you're probably used to seeing me do. But I really was having so much fun with this, and I really wanted to play with keeping my edges soft and going into the background and keeping everything somewhat muted. So the warmest color on this entire piece is actually the back of this bird, where you can see where I used a lot of the burnt siennas. again, using this little pointed round brush, I'm able to get some of the lighter details, and I'm just hitting using basically the white paint and going over the edges. And so I'm being very deliberate. I'm giving it a very feathery stroke, because remember that it is feathers, right? Each individual feather lies on top of another feather, and so I have to get those little edges. Those are just the little edges of the feathers in the chest area. So you want to be able to look as though they can lift up, because he can lift those up. Now, the female and the male basically have the same coloration. The females are just a little heftier. They're a little bit bigger, but they look basically the same color. That's true with most of your raptor family. The females are almost always larger than the males. But here the coloring is pretty much the same. So, I titled this painting, "Who Cooks for You?" And that's kind of known as the call that they make. They're who cooks for you? And so that came my friend Paul Reimer, who is an amazing sculptor, great guy, was the one who suggested that. And I thought, what, that's a good name, that's a good title for this piece. So who cooks for you? And I've used that before, bird calls, in some of my other paintings. I think I don't know if you remember one that had the black Angus cattle with the red-winged blackbird. Its call is known as cocklery. Cocklery is what the red-winged blackbird call is. So it's cocklery holds audience. Anyway, again, I'm digressing again. But here, I'm just putting in a lot of the detail that's going to go in here, and I'm still being very conscious about leaving a lot of the cooler tones that you see, the grayer tones. You don't want to cover it all up, because you really want to create that depth. And that the body, the structure of the bird underneath the feathers, that part of the body would come a little bit more forward, and other parts would kind of be more recessed. So you want to leave that cool color there. So that's what I'm doing here. Still using that little pointed round. It's an amazing little brush, and it's getting the work done for me. At this point, I'm feeling pretty confident that my bird is pretty much complete. So I've got the wet paint around it, and I'm going to go ahead and start working on the background, but I wanted to pull you in a little closer so you can actually see a lot of the details in, and I try to focus the major part of the detail in the more frontal aspect of this bird, because that's the part you would see closest to you, right? So I feel good. I feel like the bird's done. Now let's tackle that background. with trying to keep dimension in the actual background space, it's easier for me to work into a wet surface. So you can see I'm constantly kind of putting a thin coat of paint down and working it in. And it gives me that, where you have the feeling of their sticks in space, so to speak. And I'm just really bringing those twigs in around in different ways. And so before I can jump on to the primary sticks that the bird is perched on, I've got to do the background foliage first. So I'm just kind of working it in here. And I'm using a variety of brushes here. I've used a sword brush, I've used a filbert, I've used some pointed rounds. But you can see, the sticks that are in the most detailed are the ones that are a little bit closer to us in the frame, but it's just a tangled mess of wood, and that's really what I wanted to do here. It's obviously probably late winter or early spring. Things aren't budded out yet. I don't have leaves, and I really wanted to keep it gray and misty. So that's what that's why I left it this way. And I'm working from basically left to right on this painting, and I wanted to really capture the neat, interesting colors that's in these in the sticks and the twigs and branches and limbs. So you can see there's purples and greens and all these fun colors, and that's really kind of where a lot of the color is. Like I said, the most warmth that you're going to see on this piece is the bright yellow, the cad yellow that's in the bill and the area over the back of the bird. But then there's some interesting color that is also in these sticks and twigs and all this good stuff. So yeah, this is where I have fun because I'm playing with color and actually putting moss down on the twigs. And yeah, this is fun. I can just do this all day long. As a matter of fact, I pretty much did this whole background in a day, and but enjoyed every step of the way. Sticks and twigs, and I wanted to leave some negative space for the bird to be able to fly in and out of. What's amazing about owls is they can fly into some of the tightest places and not even touch a wing feather on anything. They're awesome, but I wanted to give them an out, and I'm softening up some of the sticks and loosening it up a little bit. I'm painting the sticks in, and sometimes going in with just a stick with some oil and just softening the edges, putting some white, like the light's catching it, that sort of thing. Remember, folks, if you have any questions about anything I'm covering in today's video, just, leave it in the comments section. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. Now, I'm just putting some more moss and just some more texture on top of this this stick here, and it's looking good. I'm really digging this piece, y'all. You have to know. And I'm making sure that the bottom of my stick has a lot of come in. I've got people standing outside. Sorry about that little interruption. I had some folks from Tacoma, Washington come into the art studio today, so I had to visit with those folks for just a little bit. But anyhow, you can see with a lot of the sticks, I'm putting little bits of detail on the sticks, and I'm kind of wrapping it up on this piece. I am getting close to the end, and I'm looking at my owl again, seeing if there's any brightness that I can add to the bird. I want my bird to stand out against the kind of drab background. So I am just kind of brightening up some of the whites where I can, and just looking to see what I can do. I'm at the end of it when I'm using these tiny little brushes, right? and just kind of popping in little bits of color. But I'm about to wrap this painting up. Again, folks, if you see anything that you want to ask questions about, just holler at me. Go ahead and subscribe if you're not a subscriber. You guys, that's free, so you can go ahead and do that, and you'll know when the next video comes out if you hit that bell, and you'll see the next one coming out. So, yeah, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. But we're just kind of wrapping it up. I'm just looking around, seeing if there's any other little bits on this owl that I can change or improve upon. Always looking for more contrast, whether it's contrast in light, temperature, anything I can do to make everything kind of pull together. That's what I'm working on here at the end of the painting.
Graceland, Graceland, distance, Graceland. When he's 9 years old, he's the pride of my first wife. We all will be received in Graceland. If I didn't know my own bed, noticed who's in arms like windows. I'm going to Graceland, Memphis, Tennessee, Graceland. We are going to Graceland. Calls herself a human tree.
I'm adding a few more bars to the wing, or intensifying some of the areas on the wing. And you have to do it specifically in the shape that they fall. And so here you see it's kind of like, it looks like a crescent shape. And again, just getting towards the end of the painting, I am putting in the last little bit of detail where I can. I have painted a barred owl before, and if you look at, there's a video of the young barred owl in the tree, the little fledgling. Sorry, my dog is seeing a dog outside, so he's going nuts there. There's the little fledgling barred owl piece, and that was a lot of fun. I enjoy painting birds, especially owls. So, yep. Getting ready to wrap it up. Just those little details. And again, using a pointed round brush here. Folks, we are finished. Now you can see there's a little variance in some of the colors in the back, and I've added a little bit of different colors, very subtle grays in there. Little blues, little pinks, little greens, but there's a little bit of everything in there. And I really wanted everything to harmonize, but still wanted my bird to show out well. And there's those amazing black eyes. They actually primarily hunt at night, and that's why they have the black eyes, where your yellow owl eyes primarily hunt in the day. So there you go. But we're done, and this is called Who Cooks for You?
Yeah, see, now that was fun. I do like owls, and I think they seem to be mystery to them. They're mystical, magical birds, and I can't help but think of Harry Potter, and of course the theme, the Hedwig's theme keeps playing through my head when I am painting owls like this. I think you saw how I was really trying to keep the grays muted, and you saw how in the beginning I started this by actually doing an acrylic base to my canvas, and I wanted just a very gray, just wanted a gray, because I wanted to help that to lead the overall muted tones for this. So really in the background, you see there's very thin layer of paint over the acrylic. And I like doing it that way, especially if I have something that has a pretty much of a homogeneous background color. It does help to just use your acrylic paint. One, acrylic paint's a little less expensive than oil, and two, it gives a lot more depth. You can really get the look that I wanted with the grays here. And I modeled it a little bit. I did, shake it up and, change it up a little bit in the background. It's not that flat that I started off with, but this was a lot of fun to do, and I'm looking forward to doing more. So I actually went ahead and painted several panels, smaller panels, the same gray color, so that I can do the series kind of the same way. So there you go. So you'll have to stay tuned for those videos coming to you real soon. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up. And consider joining and being a subscriber if you're not already a subscriber, and perhaps you want to join my YouTube membership platform. So that's another fun place. So we have a good time. So from Kingsport, Tennessee, I want to say thank you so much, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.